Center's Day.
I'm Tiffany Harrison. I'm a National Society of Black Engineers Public Policy Director. My professional background is in city governance with a mix of nonprofit. I work locally for the city of San Diego, Council President Pro Tem Montgomery Scott, and I advise her on public safety issues as well as tech and jobs and workforce. So I try to use my expertise within NSBE to help guide people to understanding governance. I'm not a technical expert. I went to lightly go through OSTP and NASA, but Enanga is here to explain all the great work that she has been doing nationally to highlight Black Space Week and also to get more involved in federal initiatives. So, all right, introduce yourself.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Enanga Fale. I'm director of the Aerospace SIG. I'm really excited that we're all here to discuss defining the future of aerospace. Side of NSBE, I work for Northrop Grumman, so I am a senior systems engineering manager. A systems engineering and architecture group, a system integration group, and a visualization immersive systems lab, where we get to use augmented and virtual reality to understand how our different weapon systems may work. With that said, as my colleague here has highlighted, we're going to go through a discussion on defining the future of policy, White House National Space Council overview. So I'll hand it off to you, Tiffany. What's up? Yes. So we are here to help the next professional membership get educated, and also study, advise, and provide recommendations to the National Society of Black Engineers that's geared to personal, professional, and civic engagement interest. Next slide. Also, we are here to help develop special policy solutions that can come in different ways. Sometimes it's writing research papers, sometimes providing public comment through government entities, such as going through meetings or writing comments through papers, and also doing lectures and attending forums and conferences like this. Next slide. And then last, real quick, the sixth goal for anybody who may be interested in the future. We're not anything like a lobbying group or think tank. STIG stands for Special Interest Group. A lot of people in politics think that's something that has to do with lobbying some money, but with NSBE, it's really just a tool to provide more information to the group so they can be more educated on what's going on, well, locally and nationally. Next slide. Okay, so OSCP is here to provide the president with advice on what's going on with science and technology. There's two main goals, or two ways you can think about it when it comes to the Office of Science and Technology Policy. There is policy to inform science and technology, and then there's science and technology to inform policy. So what that means for the first one, science and technology to inform policy, is having non-government stakeholders, subject matter expertise like you all are, or you all will be one day, informing policy so that the better decisions can be made to go both to the president or to different groups. And then for policy for science and technology is doing things like speaking to R&D, doing research, and also putting money into R&D so you can fund better research for science and technology, and also government and the oversight that goes through the National Science Foundation and also NASA. So there's a lot of different agencies and entities. I'm not going to go through like all the hierarchy and the flow charts of how everything runs through the president and how the Science Technology Council convenes folks. But I did want to provide like a broad overview of the OSCP. Here are some of the goals up here. Next slide. And then last, today we're giving we're really giving a work overview of the work of the Aerospace SIG, but the Space Council is attached to something called the User Advisory Group. And the Space Council really came about in the presidential administration of, I believe, President Eisenhower, was convened at the time to, keep in line with the race to, space. But over a course of the administrations, they would convene the Space Council, then they wouldn't convene the Space Council. So it came back with the President Bush era. Then they stopped due to some political concerns, and then it was reinstituted by the President Trump era. Now as they carried on through, the Biden era, and Vice President Kamala Harris has been involved, with working with the agency, NASA, which also helps with appointing people to the User Advisory Group. The National Space Council is also, the National Space Council User Advisory Group is also known as a Federal Advisory Committee. So for folks who, don't want to get on the Space Council User Advisory Group and are interested in federal advisory committees, that's something that's in all departments. So if that's something that you're interested in, I encourage you to look at the registry. Our public policy SIG does workshops on how to get on federal advisory committees and boards and commissions. And we have a session coming up this week that's going to focus on EPA. But I just want to make sure that I share overall that the federal advisory committees are a way to get involved in a lot of different departments. So from DOT to EPA, there's a lot of opportunities out there to serve and to give your expertise back. And then last, this QR code right here, if you want to see the space priority framework that's out there with the two specific main goals that the National Space Council has set, and the bit.ly right there also leads to the framework. And then while people are trying to get the QR code to provide more information on the difference between the Space Council and the User Advisory Group, the User Advisory Group is, again, subject matter experts, whereas like the Space Council is the leader of departments. So the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, and it's convened by the Vice President. They all meet to inform the President of Science and Technology, well, space-related issues specifically. The User Advisory Group is folks that are industry leaders. So it's a very broad gamut of folks who are involved in aerospace. So that, go to the next slide.
So what has the Aerospace SIG's engagement been in public policy? So Tiffany has done an amazing job really counseling the Aerospace SIG in terms of what are some of the different opportunities to engage and why we should engage. So the first one is attended the Office of Science and Technology leader event. There's a picture, you see that guy back there, Dr. Johnson was at the meeting. So the National Space Council held an event this year, which I would say is the inaugural event, National Black Space Week. And at that event, they convened astronauts, commercial astronauts, commercial astronauts in terms of Dr. Proctor. Some of you may be familiar with her. She was on Inspiration 4 with SpaceX. Dr. Mae Jemison was there also. There was a number of people who worked as ambassadors to other countries, and they really talked about what is the future of space and what does it mean to have diverse populations such as us in this room engage in the space, the new space economy. And so what does that look like when you go to the continent of Africa? That was a conversation that came up. Also looking at how are we inviting that next generation through the arts, and how are we inspiring people into space? And so it was a really, really great meeting where we were able to bring different people from engineering to policymakers to artists, different business leaders to really talk about space and talk about whether or not we are properly designing our pathway into space. The next major thing is responding to requests for information. So the OSTP has had a number of requests for information come out specifically to ISS. So yesterday we heard from one of the leaders, research leaders, in terms of looking at what should be some of the missions that are done on ISS. The OSTP was looking for requests for comment or information in terms of what should be our research priorities as we're looking at decommissioning or repurposing the ISS. And so NSBE, Aerospace SIG, we wrote a response in regards to that. That particular paper, we really focused a lot on, okay, what are some of the things impacting our communities when it comes to research? When we talk about space exploration, there are a number of different health factors that may impact a particular population. How are we doing research around those areas? How are we also inviting small businesses into the space market by giving them research opportunities on the ISS? And so that particular paper really highlighted different avenues that at that time we felt that are really important to NSBE members and our allies in terms of how can we get involved in future research. We've written a number of technical position papers. One of the things that has happened, this goes beyond the US, is Kevin is in the room. He and I started off in the SIG researching East Africa spaceport feasibility study. And those papers have found themselves in many people's hands in terms of they're looking at them in terms of what should be our roadmap for space. And so a number of position papers that you can write defining the future of space have been written, and people are leveraging that, whether they be in country or external to the U.S. In this case, Kenya. You see a picture over there. So some of you may have heard of the CHIPS Act, and Tiffany can go into a little bit more detail on all the impact of the CHIPS Act. We had an opportunity to attend an event during the Congressional Black Caucus, right? With Congressman
Bernice Johnson.
Bernice Johnson. So there was astronauts there. You see Leyland in the background. And so really talking about science and technology and that investment. Can you touch on the CHIPS Act, why that's important for us?
There's a lot to cover with the CHIPS Act, but it's very overwhelming. But we'll say it's a piece of legislation that Congressman Bernice Johnson that is no longer serving on for a very long time. And there's also a lot of RFPs that are out, a lot of rolling RFPs going out to get involved into the process for the CHIPS Act. So I don't want to go too in depth because it's a lot. You say more time for presentation.
Yes. All right. With that, then we can move forward.
So just want to highlight ways to stay connected, of course, social media, but if you want to continue to evolve with this, if you want to continue to watch what the Space Council is doing, I encourage you to stay in the loop with Vice President's initiatives. There's also another initiative going on right now called Fight for Our Freedom. So I want to include that for students. In case you're at any of these universities or you have a friend that's at these universities. I know she just went to Hampton, but you also be at North Carolina Morehouse College, College of Southern Nevada, and also Northern Arizona University. This is just like a road show for her to go around and talk about different things like funding, or not funding, common sense gun reforms, reproductive rights, things that students are passionate about. So I continue to encourage folks to stay connected in research, but also on social media, because I know that's what folks use a lot. And then also for the SIG, we have different project teams, the Federal Advisory Committee engagement, public policy research, data innovation, STEM education, also social justice and community engagement. But most of all, I want to share a resource that folks have found to be helpful. This was produced by an organization that wanted to give information about internships and making that transition into policy, because I know we all can't serve on federal boards or commissions, right? But if it's something that is of interest to you in the future, or you want to learn how to write technical papers and build that strength, I find this document to be helpful. So that's right. take a picture of that, QR code is gonna lead to a document on, careers in science policy. It's gonna go through a variety of, disciplines where you can read testimony from folks who are in science policy and how their experience was. There's a section in there that goes over internship opportunities. It also breaks down the different government committees and how you can gain internships or roles into there. And then the section I'm gonna highlight in this document, you go to the next one, is this, because this, for me, it breaks down the different areas that you can get in when it comes to policy. A lot of folks just think about politics and that's it. I know it's very small, but it's in the document. But you can get into everything from like diplomacy, doing things internationally, like Nathan said, you work with a bureau, you have pen and papers for embassy, foreign service. You can get into regulation, research and data is very popular for technical papers. So to me, this provides a good overview so you can see all the different opportunities that are out there for science policy to expand your horizons. So with that, I want to end there and open the floor for questions. Any questions?
A little clarity on, within the script, how you guys are talking about, it's unclear to me what it covers. I know we don't want to go into detail, but like, what did it actually cover? What is it impacting? That's unclear.
She can elaborate more, but the CHIPS Act, I know from a microprocessor chip standpoint, there's a concern that we don't necessarily have the materials within the US or just access in general to produce those chips that we need. But beyond that, if you look at the CHIPS Act, because I'm actually preparing for a discussion on it, it goes beyond that. There is millions of dollars connected to that in terms of funding STEM education and also development of different populations for STEM. So the CHIP Act, there's the piece that the tech industry is very interested in, and then there's this huge investment, and there's a lot of dollars behind that. And so it's really important, because in a meeting I was recently having for communities to kind of understand the breadth of that act, it's more than just the chips. There's infrastructure and tons of investment. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, it's like $280 billion worth of investment, and it's for, like she said, the semiconductor industry. So you have a very narrow crowd that's going to go after, like, we need to get better microchips for Intel, or what is the newest microchip that's coming out. Locally, professionally, I went to a meeting where you have folks that are trying to compete to submit an RFP because they want to get the best semiconductors in the region. And then you have the larger conversation, like Enanga just described, about the money that's going to go into just pushing STEM and like encouraging folks to get involved in that way, which is why there's so many rolling cycles of RFPs, because people are constantly applying to get this funding to produce and also to compete with other countries to create better semiconductors and keep up. So that's why I said it's broad, but yeah.
And it's important to know about it now because we had two conversations yesterday about funding opportunities in research. And so this act that was just passed is also another avenue. And so.
Yeah, I was just gonna expand on some of the impact talking about the CHIPS Act. And there are a number of people, like within NASA, you know, there is a real drive to look at pretty much every piece of equipment that you buy and where are the semiconductors from that piece of equipment being derived, maybe. And so now we're under a requirement that any piece of even basic laboratory equipment you buy can't have chips in there from China, right? There are very strong ITAR and other restrictions that impact us. Then you look at sort of the other side. In the state of Ohio, we have a new Intel factory that the state really pushed to get, that's going to be built here in the near future. And one of the things a lot of people don't pay as much attention to in the federal government is we're also pressed to put a certain amount of our budget into small disadvantaged businesses, right? And so if we're buying all of this equipment, we want to look at, who is benefiting from that, right? If it's a foreign source, we're shut off from it. We need US sources for it. And if it's a US source, we don't just want it to be Intel, but who is Intel partnering as a supplier or a distributor? And is it a woman-owned business? Is it a minority-owned business? So it really is becoming all encompassing. And for anybody who thinks it doesn't impact their life, think about what happened during the midst of the pandemic, where there was a huge supply and demand problem, right? So there were cars that were manufactured and sitting at because they couldn't get the chips to put in them to get them out to the dealerships. And so suddenly the price of used cars went through, right? So it has all these sort of sneaky impacts that they're trying to get their hands around. It's huge. It really is.
Want to comment on National Women Black Space Week. I thought it was really interesting that the first panel there was Dr. Mae Jemison, but also you had the United States ambassador to the United Nations.
Yep.
And her presence there and some of the things that she shared, I thought was very impactful along the line of policy and global kind of placement and impact and so forth. And there was something that I didn't really have the appreciation for. So I was glad to see her there, and also just as an African American woman being in that role. So I just wanted to add that just a little bit. And just also, we did have Mr. Greg Robinson, who has been a sponsor of the Aerospace SIG when he was at ASIG. He's retired, but he also was on one of the panels at Space Week, so he always represents and supports us in those events.
And for those who don't know, Mr. Greg Robinson, he led the James Webb Telescope for NASA. So, and he was the leader. What's the formal title?
Yeah, he was the program director.
Yeah.
Program director for the James Webb Space Telescope. So he was actually awarded Time Magazine. Show award number of different. He was on one of the late night shows and interviews.
Yeah.
That's well.
Yeah, the one other thing I'll say is, there's a play that many of you may have seen, Hamilton, right? And there's a song in Hamilton in the room where it happens. And one of the things about space policy or any other policy kind of job is having that ability to be in the room where big decisions are made. It's one thing, like me, I was a technology developer, right? I worked at NASA in the lab, did all these things through management. And it's not until this point in my career that I've started to have more of an interest in, well, how was that decision made? I know what it did to me down here, but who were the people in the room who made that decision? Because I don't think they had anybody who had my set of experiences in that room, because I don't understand decisions. And so if you could drive people to that end of it, to where they're in the policy making rooms, whether it's space law or any of those policy making, that's an amazing impact, because you start to be able to steer things. That's an amazing impact. Not that I ever want to cut anybody off from being, the fundamental researcher and scientist, but, because I would be remiss if I did that, but to be on that end where you get to make some of those decisions, or at least be in the room to understand who the real power brokers are, that's where you're starting to drive bus. And that would be a huge impact.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree with that. When I traveled with Tiffany to the Congressional Black Caucus, that was my first time going to that conference. And so she kind of set up, like, these are the meetings that you should go to. This is what each of these meetings mean. And like you said, you start to see exactly where the conversations start and all the different players. And I think it's really important, as the Aerospace SIG, she has a program called A Seat at the Table, in terms of looking at intentionally, how are we getting involved in these different boards and commissions, and just putting inserting our voice where it makes sense. And so that's what I would say the ask is that, we've started down this path to the point where OSTP does reach out to the Aerospace SIG and regularly invite us to different sessions. It wasn't mentioned here, the OSTP has a campaign, the National Space Council, focused on Inspire and connected to the workforce 2025, I believe, the future workforce efforts that we've heard the people from Virgin Galactic and the Brooke Owens Fellowship talking about yesterday. And so, and now we're starting to be pulled in that conversation. Last year, Vice President Kamala Harris announced the Space Council, their focus, and they called out organizations that are helping really with that. And the Aerospace SIG was listed as one of those, having programs that are available to really help, grow that future workforce. That's one part of it. But the other part of it is, now that we grow it, what does it really mean to engage in work in space, and taking our different communities there and stuff.
And I would say you could do both, if you are bent on doing research and you want to be that person, like that big bucks, you can do that, but you can also serve. That's why we encourage folks to come out to conferences, but also if you can get on these bodies, whether it's a board or commission, a federal advisory committee, so you can provide your subject matter expertise and make those decisions, as you said, with your lived experience. One of the things that a member of my group is doing is trying to get minority business owners, women business owners to get through the contracting process through CHIPS, because that's one of the biggest barriers, is understanding what the RFP is and getting the resources that you need to get through to the next level. So it's going to take us to help us, and really appreciate and then lifting up this work and staying engaged. Now you all get engaged as well.
And the CHIPS RFP is different from the ones we learned about yesterday too. It's a whole nother channel. Well, that's all that we have planned for today.